lived in East Rockaway. So St. Joseph's was right down East Rockaway Road from me. So that was my major group. And I worked Tuesday and Thursday evenings, so Wednesday and Friday was fine. And I'm trying to remember when the Lawrence group was. It must have been Monday and Wednesday. And then from there, I moved to Rockville Center. And I started, but that was only in the 90s, about 95, I moved here, 96.
Okay, and have you been involved with Rockville Center groups?
Well, only with the one I'm in, the Methodist Church, we call it the Rockville Center Discussion Group.
When does that meet?
It meets Tuesday and Friday.
In the evening?
Yeah, yeah.
I know
but when I first got here, I wasn't working so much on Thursday, so there was a women's group at the VFW on Maple.
So that brings up an interesting subject. Groups that have specific purposes, groups that are men's or women's groups.
They weren't around back then. I should have kept some of the meeting books.
I know some of the men who were helpful to me early in my sobriety had kind of unofficial meetings at some of their houses. They would have coffee, and then a bunch of alcoholics would be there, and it wasn't a meeting on the list, but they were pretty good. And
I remember Jane, who recently, she just died a few weeks ago, Jane W. in Long Beach. She had a women's meeting in her house in Long Beach a long time ago. She was sober about 41, 42 years in November.
And that wasn't on the list, though? It was an unofficial
No,
meeting?
that was unofficial, and then eventually it evolved into a regular group.
But it didn't stay at her house?
No.
I don't think you can have a meeting in
No,
here.
she moved out of Long Beach. She moved to Rockville Center.
Yeah, and now they have meetings for people with different, gender identities or, gay and.
Yeah, they have gay lesbian group here on Long Island. I don't know when that started.
Yeah, I think they have a few.
Oh yeah.
Or meetings that have that designation.
Yeah.
That have a.
Yeah, there's one in.
Acronyms or something
I know
associated.
there's one on Sunday in Belmore. I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I know they've had some issues with moving anniversaries and moving days for people with different religious beliefs. I know some, the Orthodox Jewish folks who go to the early risers have requested that anniversaries not be on Saturday mornings because getting there would be challenging for them.
They couldn't, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Unless they live nearby and they could walk.
So, group conscience in AA has evolved to address the needs.
All populations, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. See, I remember Bill, we used to have Bill's dinner once a year. And it would be at the Waldorf usually. And our group would take a table.
And you'd go.
Oh, yeah. And Bill would be there.
So you met Bill and Lois, or at least
were
at these?
In fact, I have Lois's signature in a book. Yeah, where it says Lois Remembers. She gave me that book. And Marty Mann was the first woman in AA. And I knew her. And
she was in the New York area?
Yes, she was in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
She was quite a woman.
So let's stick to
Nassau County.
Nassau County AA and ways in which it evolved, and because this is really
it evolved first of all because after a while people weren't as afraid.
What do you mean?
Well, afraid to go to meetings. I mean, I went to my first meeting, and there was someone that my husband, an employee of my husband, was there. It was very funny. We laughed.
But people were afraid of that sort of thing because of kind of the shame of it.
It was.
And has that perception, I guess, has changed to some extent. The stigma.
It's softened a little bit, but I think now the concern I have is the amount of drugs. There is very few pure alcoholics anymore. The young people are so multiply addicted, and some groups. I go to a group on Monday night where you can't mention dry goods.
Yeah, just booze?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, I love that group.
Yeah, I had a sponsor who used to go there.
Yeah, because I know so many of the guys professionally.
So I remember that being sort of an unofficial requirement, is that you really didn't talk about drugs. You went to, there's another fellowship for drugs.
If people identify themselves primarily as alcoholics, even if they're duly addicted, but they can go to I'm thinking of several people I know who were heavily into drugs as young people, dry goods as we call it, but they were also drinking. Drinking was also a big...
Well, if they have the desire to not drink at the third tradition, they
absolutely,
they're welcome.
But no, these are people who primarily came into AA.
When did you start to notice that sort of thing?
What? The multiple
the more, people who were more... and do you think it was more that there were more people
No, they're younger. It's the age. It's the generation.
Really?
You see.
Or do you think AA is allowing them to talk about it more, and that's why you hear about it more?
I don't know. It's up to each group. They decide.
Right.
But as the younger people come in, even though they know to just talk about alcohol here, that's where I picked up the term dry goods. Because they'll say, I also messed around with other stuff or something like that. But,
and it's prefaced often by, I know this is AA, but... ...
Or they don't even do that, But because AA is more stable, and I hope that this business of it becoming like a college course, where they got to study the steps. I had someone call me up, Adele, would you do the 4th step with me? Well, she happened to be sober about 5 years. So I said, sure, I'll help you. But my sponsor didn't sit down with me. She told me how to do it, and I tell people how to do it. You draw a line down. Oh, and then I think it was Hazelton or somebody put out instruction papers on the 4th step.
Well, in the big book, they do have these columns.
Yeah.
It is talked about.
So that's what I was taught, the columns. That's it.
And did people say the 3rd step prayer as part of the step experience with their sponsors? I know.
What's the 3rd step prayer?
I offer myself to thee to build with me and do. It's out of the big book. Yeah, no. That was not your experience.
No. The other thing that concerns me, I don't know if the Lord's Prayer was part of the original
No,
program.
This is a 3rd step prayer in the big book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like if you read the steps in as they're explained in the big book, which are not as concise as in the 12 and 12,
right.
But it does say, we came to the 3rd step and we often said this, and there's also a 7th step prayer, and of course there's the 11th step prayer, which is
I don't remember that.
St. Augustine's prayer.
I did work my way through the big book, but it's funny, I don't remember that stuff. I must have blocked it.
Well, and also being dyslexic, the book learning aspect of it was not
appealing.
Not part of your experience.
No. I have 2 master's degrees.
Well, which says a lot for you.
No, just lucky.
Wow.
I'm curious. In fact, one of the research papers I did was on the history of alcohol, the history of alcohol beverage.
Really?
And that was fascinating. It goes way, 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 way back.
I bet. But so just getting back and kind of finishing up with Nassau.
I don't have much of a memory. Yeah.
Well, but you have a lot of experience.
Yeah.
What are some of the big differences that you see today in the way service is? We go to a lot of institutions.
In my group,
yeah,
I became the general service rep because there was none, nor had there been for as long as I was in that group. There's no intergroup rep. So I brought that up. Tomorrow night we'll have a business meeting. And, we have someone in our group who tells you how humble he is, which gives you a hint. Methinks thou dost protest too much. And, oh my God, terrible. We had somebody coming in with a service dog, and the person sat way back near the door, and this humble person was sitting right up at the front and shouted across the room, "You can't bring that dog in here." So I said to her, "Stay." And then I spoke to the priest, and then I called Mr. Humble.
Is this an intergroup?
No, this is at our group.
Oh.
And this young woman has all sorts of issues, very serious, like she's afraid to go out in this climate now because she's immune compromised and has asthma on top of it, and doesn't want to stop breathing. But she can go to, there are many groups she can go to. And
so I guess groups have really evolved to address or decide not to address the needs of different people.
Well, no, therapy dogs are allowed anywhere. So this person is able to come with the therapy dog. And the room is big enough that if anyone is allergic, so sit over there.
Okay.
And she's smart enough to stay back anyway, because she doesn't want to hold hands, she doesn't want people breathing on her. Takes all kinds. But the change I've seen is this academic approach to the steps, which my feeling is whatever works. If that works for you and you want to sit down and study them, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people who are very big on that and who will say they believe that getting new people involved in the steps right away will get them sober faster. And look, maybe for some of them that's probably true,
yes.
But for some of them not. If
it would have been too much for me.
And for me too. If I had someone coming over to me saying, "You have to do this, you must do this," the word "must" is in there so many times.
I wouldn't have done it.
Well, I would have walked away, and I did. I did walk away.
I was at a meeting. I took a newcomer to a beginners meeting. Oh, it was a big book meeting, I think. And I walked in, and there's a fellow sitting at the front table with the book, and the woman sitting next to him. And there were fellows, clearly new people. They looked like they'd come from a sober house or something. Plus ordinary people. It's here in Nassau. And the first thing I noticed was he had earrings and they were crosses. And then I began to notice his tattoos. And they were all crosses and crucifixes and Jesus and all of this. I'm not Christian. And I was thinking, oh God, if this was my first meeting, and everything, and then it was the world according to him. It was his meeting, and he apparently ran it every week. And at the end of the meeting, he hands me a rosary. I went up to, thank him for sharing, and then I said to him, you may want to rethink so much mention of Jesus, and thank you for your gesture of giving me the rosary, but I'm Jewish, so please give it to someone who would appreciate it.
Now, I expect that changed at that group.
I certainly hope so.
Oh, you haven't been back?
I have been back. He wasn't there.
Yeah.
I've been back since. Do you know the group I'm talking about? Yeah.
No.
It was the very first group very first meeting I ever went to, because I called into group, and they put me in touch in New York. They put me in touch with 2 women from Baldwin. I was in East Rockaway.
So that actually brings up the notion. So for me, that is the idea of a group having a particular idea of a higher power. Mm-hmm. If a person is chairing the group and that is the person's, they're talking about that, while they're welcome to have that, having that as a part of the group might not really fly
no.
tradition-wise. So that brings up the idea, have many groups, do most groups use, and have they used the Serenity Prayer? I mean, certainly the Lord's Prayer, you see at a lot of groups.
They use, it depends upon, at our group we'll always ask someone, you take us out. So first they say a moment of silence for the still sick and suffering, followed by either, and then they say the we version of the Serenity Prayer, or the Serenity Prayer, or the Lord's Prayer.
And that's always been the case?
No, I don't remember the Lord's Prayer long ago.
Oh, more in that it's moved towards that in recent years, at least to a degree.
To what I remember.
Okay.
It doesn't mean I'm accurate.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't remember the Lord's Prayer being said. Because to me that's Christian, which is secular, and AA is non-secular. So I always wondered about that.
Are there any other trends that you see, Nassau AA in general, given that Nassau is your...
It's hard for me to tell because, how would I know?
Only by your own experience and perceptions.
Yeah, I go to these two groups. Once in a while I'll go to another group, like I went to a meeting out in Levittown. It was a women's meeting last week, and if I can get to the women's meeting over here on Wednesday night, I will. But somebody started another kind of meeting at 5:30 in St. Agnes. I don't think it's listed in the big book, in the meeting list. It may be, but it's what did they call it? Not spirituality. Like a meditation meeting. Now, have you heard of those?
I have been. They have one in Point Lookout on Thursdays, and I go there.
Oh, okay.
That's a new thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I never knew it existed. Yeah, she has, and that's Wednesday night. Here it is. Here it is. St. Agnes, Wednesday night at 5:30, prayer and meditation meeting. Now, in the beginning, it's step 11, they say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that would have scared the hell out of me. But that may be just the way I am. Even if I ought to go and see what it's like before I
find them very peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
The meeting that I go to, the speaker picks a reading from conference-approved literature on spirituality, on the 11th step. It's frequently something from the big book,
Right.
We agnostics, and reads just a paragraph or two, and then is silent for 10 minutes. The meeting is silent for 10 minutes, and we just sit and breathe. And after 10 minutes, a little bell goes off, and they read it again, and they share for a few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes, and then there's open sharing, and that's it.
Good.
And then they read the 11th step prayer
Mm-hmm.
at the end to close the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That is read by the speaker. And that's how it's done in
Mm-hmm.
Point Lookout on Thursday nights at 8:30.
Yeah.
I often go.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, there's one here on Wednesday night. Wednesday 5:30.
Well, this is something that's evolved.
Yeah. And what happened is we have a women's meeting at 7:30. And so this cuts into it. So the women's meeting attendance has dropped off.
It's interesting.
So I don't know, whatever works. If it works, great. It's attraction. As long as I know when I'm talking to a newcomer, I tell them, you'll hear people will say things, and as my sponsor used to say, some are sicker than others, and just Don't argue. Just do what works for you. The whole idea is to stay sober for 24 hours. And whatever you need to do that, great, till the head clears up. Because it takes a while.